Speciation, let's continue this one. So further information, go to Speciation Wikipedia individual article, as always. So continue further. So speciation is a process of splitting one lineage into two lineages that evolve independently from each other. For speciation to occur, there has to be reproductive isolation. And just note, the mechanisms of reproductive isolation are a collection of evolutionary mechanisms, behaviors, and physiological processes critical for speciation. They prevent members of different species from producing offspring or ensure that any offspring are sterile. These barriers maintain the integrity of a species by reducing gene flow between related species. So, for example, here's an isolated setup right here. Yeah, let's just look at this one here. So, gene flow is the transfer of alleles from one population to another population through immigration of individuals. So you're transferring the genetic material or the alleles, so the types of characteristics. So, for example, if you have population A, selection pressure against recessive phenotype has created a homozygous population, which is HH. Yeah, so in this case, let's say you have a giant mountain blocking these two species of birds, and you'll have this setup right here. So it's going to be a blue bird here, and selection pressure against recessive phenotype. So it has created a homozygous population of dominant genes. So HH, this is dominant HH, and it's homozygous. So there's not even a chance for the recessive lower H for the red. So the next, population B has selection pressure against dominant phenotype, has created a homozygous population 8, lowercase hh. So you have lowercase hh, which is red, and there's recessive. So it's always going to be red because there's no dominant gene. And then once you have a transfer of this bird over to this one here, then the offspring of these two, of this bird plus any one of these, offspring of a immigrated bird has a genotype of capital HH. So it's a heterozygous. So the dominant one wins, which is the blue. So it's going to be blue. And then on this side, this one goes here. Offspring of immigrated bird has a phenotype of the same. It's going to be H, capital H and lowercase h. And it's going to be blue. So in this case, it's still going to be blue here. But then, so then you're going to need another bird go in there. You have another HH. And then if those intermix, you're going to have a chance for a homozygous recessive. So a red chance. Yeah. But so you'll need another one there. But this one here is blue. And now if this goes with any one of these, you're going to have a scenario where, we're going to have red and blue. red and blue, etc. But if this dominant one, each time this one goes here, is going to get a blue. This one goes here, is going to turn blue initially, but a heterozygous. And they're both going to be heterozygous. Very fascinating stuff. So yes, this is a barrier. So gene flow, you can have a barrier such as a giant mountain. Or just a location in general. All right, let's continue further. Let's look at another type of reproductive isolation, and this can result from incompatibilities between genes as described by Bateson-Dobzhansky-Muller model. And again, as opposed to this setup, which is physically separated, but you could also have it such that it's genetically separated. In other words, what you have is other mechanisms where you can they can prevent members of different species from producing offspring. This is like physical ones, or ensure that any offspring are sterile. So other mechanisms such as genetic the incompatibilities and so on. So they can't actually have offspring, or they die off, or they are sterile. So they never actually are able to reproduce, or they can't reproduce. Not much of the population can reproduce. So MES note the Bateson-Dobzhansky-Muller model, also known as Dobzhansky-Muller model, is a model of the evolution of genetic incompatibility, important in understanding the evolution of reproductive isolation during speciation and the role of natural selection in bringing it about. It describes the negative or incompatible epistatic interactions that occur between genes with a different evolutionary history, and these genetic incompatibilities can occur when populations are hybridizing. And just go over this epistasis. So epistasis is a phenomenon in genetics in which the effect of a gene mutation is dependent on the presence or absence of mutations in one or more other genes, respectively termed modifier genes. In other words, the effect of the mutation is dependent on the genetic background in which it appears. And when you have a negative such over here, then it can rise to a incompatibility with the with the different genes. Yeah, so either the hybrid is going to be when they're hybridizing, so either it could be sterile, or just like it will die off, or there isn't many that can reproduce, and so it's not viable. So we'll get to that here. So basically, a hybrid incompatibility, or hybrid incompatibility, is a phenomenon in plants and animals wherein most offspring produced by the mating of two different species are not viable or are unable to reproduce. Examples of hybrids include mules, which is a male donkey plus a female horse, and ligers, which are male lion plus female tiger, and these are for most cases are not able to reproduce. And these are from the animal world, and subspecies of the Asian crop Oryza sativa, I think that's how you pronounce it, to Google that, from the plant world. All right, continue further. So a hybrid is the offspring resulting from combining the qualities of two organisms of different breeds, varieties, species, or genre, plural for genus, through sexual reproduction. And hybrid inviability is a post-zygotic barrier, this is occurring after fertilization or mating, which reduces a hybrid's capacity to mature into a healthy, fit adult. The relatively low health of these hybrids relative to purebred individuals prevents gene flow between species. Thus, hybrid inviability acts as an isolating mechanism. And then limiting hybridization and allowing for differentiation of species. Yes, you're going to have two populations that are separated from the others because of this hybridization inviability. So so basically they can't. It's very low chance that the hybrid can grow up into a healthy, fit adult. And so your purebreds right here are, quote, cultivated varieties or bred for desired traits of an animal species achieved through the process of selective breeding. And when the lineage of a purebred animal is recorded, that animal is said to be pedigreed. Purebreds breed true to type, which means the progeny or the offspring of like-to-like purebred parents will carry the same phenotype or observable characteristics of the parents. Yeah, so basically, hybrid inviability is on the opposite spectrum of a purebred, which is you're constantly breeding the same desired type, etc. constantly. That's very interesting. So now let's go over this simplified just model of that type of hybridization and also an incompatibility possibility. So, for example, here's figure 1. In the ancestral population, the genotype is big A, and then big B, or in other words, just capital A, and capital B. So what you have is this will be a diploid cell, assuming of the organism, and so basically it has a pair of each chromosome, or in other words, two sets of each chromosome. So you have one set over here and another set there. And then let's say that the full genotype is this: you have two genes in this simplified model. So you have a capital A and B, and then this is other one's capital A and B. So the alleles are the same. So there's just the genes are the same. So there's no alleles in this case. And then what happens is, let's say you have this right here. In the ancestral population, the genotype is AABB. When two populations become isolated from each other, new mutations can arise. Let's say there's a mountain here, and now they're separated. So now you have separated on one side and the other one on this side, and then they're not getting close. And then you're going to have is, in one case, you may have this in one population A evolves, in one population A, capital A evolves into lower A, or big A evolves into small a. So you have this evolves over to here in this specific species there, or in this population, because it's separated from that mountain. So let's keep that mountain there. And then what you have is this side here. The next one's going to be, and then the other B, capital B or big B evolves into small b. So you have big B goes into small b there. All right, so you have that setup. Let's just erase this. And then the next setup is this one they hybridize, but let's say that you have fixation of new mutations. That was initial mutation. Then over a long period of time, let's say that becomes a dominant mutation in the full population. So you're going to have this eventually gets replaced. This will be B. So this will go back to here. So you're left with big A, small b, and then on this case, this one gets replaced. To this one, and you have it eventually, this will be the dominant type of organism, dominant genotype. So you have small a, big B. And now you have the hybridization setup. All right, so now you have the hybridization. And when two populations hybridize, it is the first time small a and small b interact with each other. So this is the first time they're interacting. when these alleles, and now those are gene variants. Remember, it's a yes, you have a gene A at this locus, and it could be a big A or small a. Those are variants, or alleles. So basically, when the two populations hybridize, it is the first time small a and small b interact with each other. When these alleles are incompatible, we speak of Dobzhansky-Muller incompatibilities. So if these are incompatible, the hybrids either, they can't grow to adulthood, or most of them are sterile, etc. So you're only going to have a very, very small amount that can actually, grow to adults, and even smaller that can actually grow to adults and reproduce. So then basically you're going to have a separation. So these populations are separated because the hybrid is incompatibility. So we view it as a genetic barrier. All right, very fascinating. Let's continue further. So reproductive isolation also tends to increase with genetic divergence. And speciation can occur when there are physical barriers that can divide ancestral species, a process known as allopatric speciation. And this is physical barrier, that's the mountain here. So this is a physical barrier separating, that's allopatric. And then in contrast, Sympatric speciation occurs in the absence of physical barriers. Yeah, so you can grow, so you can have speciation within, populations. Continue further. All right, so let's look at this figure right here, and this is a comparison of allopatric, Peripatric, Parapatric, and Sympatric speciations, different types. So let's say you have it over here. So let's say you have original population, just a green oval of every single one. The initial step of speciation for allopatric, that's the one with a barrier, so you have a barrier formed. And then Peripatric, the difference with this one is it's similar to this, but it's a small niche formed, that there's a pathway that you can get from here to here. And then Parapatric is a bigger niche. Basically, a bigger niche that's still connected with here. It has some gene flow there. New niche entered. This is the initial step of speciation, barrier formation. New niche entered. Both of these have new niche entered. And then you have genetic polymorphism, and there is a speciation inside this bigger population. And then evolution of reproductive isolation. So in isolation, you're going to have two separate populations. And in isolated niche right here, this is a smaller one. It's separated, and it's similar to this, but the idea is that it's smaller. Then in adjacent niche for Parapatric. And so that's separated there. And the next one is within the population is the genetic polymorphism. So within population, and that's Sympatric. That's within. So then what happens is once these are allowed to interbreed, you have new distinct species after equilibrium of new ranges. Let's say they're all suddenly allowed to, or suddenly they can all interact with each other. You're going to have each one of these new species with this hybrid inside. That's fascinating. And MES Snow, let's go over each one of these specifically. So allopatric we already went over. That's this over here. Allopatric is divided by physical barriers. Sympatric is in the absence of physical barriers. And let's go over here. So Peripatric speciation, Peripatric speciation describes when a new species is formed from an isolated peripheral population or from the outer edges. Since Peripatric speciation resembles allopatric speciation in that populations are isolated and prevented from exchanging genes, it can often be difficult to distinguish between them. Nevertheless, the primary characteristic of Peripatric speciation proposes that one of the population is much smaller than the other. So basically, it's hard to distinguish between allopatric and Peripatric in a lot of cases. But the thing is, main difference is just because they're physically separated, but the main difference is it's much smaller. So it kind of describes the pathway to get to these setup of different species. And so basically this is all just a characterization, etc. Continue further. So in Parapatric speciation, two subpopulations of a species evolve reproductive isolation from one another while continuing to exchange genes. So in other words, it's still connected to it, but you have a bigger portion separated away from that from the bigger population there. Yeah, so a bigger one over here separated from the main one. Continue further. So polymorphism is the occurrence of two or more clearly different morphs or forms, also referred to as alternative phenotypes in the population of a species. So you can have several different, you can have two or more distinct types of that same population there. And an example there is this one here. So light morph jaguar, so it's a different form or morph. So then you have this one here, so light morph jaguar, and then there's a dark morph of or melanistic, which is having melan / which is natural pigment, a jaguar. So melanistic jaguar or dark morph. about 6% of the South American population. So about 6% of these jaguars are these darker ones. So it looks pretty cool. And this is the typical one right here, the light one. Yeah, and that is a polymorphism that's within the same population. So you have a small percentage that is different from the main form. All right, let's continue further. So now let's look at types of isolation. So pre-zygotic isolation. This is occurring before fertilization or mating, such as mechanical, temporal, behavioral, habitat, and gametic. Isolations can prevent different species from hybridizing. So mechanisms you have to prevent hybridization, hence you're going to have distinct species. So just note examples of each type of isolation is listed below. So mechanical isolation right here, this is again before fertilization. So mating pairs may not be able to couple successfully if their genitals are not compatible. So that's a mechanical isolation. And then we have temporal isolation, difference in the time of sexual maturity or flowering. And to speak more about this, here's another note. So the different mating rituals of animal species creates extremely powerful reproductive barriers termed sexual or behavioral or even temporal isolation that isolate apparently similar species in the majority of the groups of the animal kingdom. In dioecious species, this is, remember when we went over it, is when you have a male and a female that produce separate gametes. And let's just have a quick recap of that from when I mentioned it earlier in the videos. Let's search dioecious. Dioecious, yeah, so initially here. Yeah, so dioecious or dioecious, from Greek for two households, is a characteristic of species, meaning that it has distinct individual organisms that produce male or female gametes either directly in animals or indirectly in seed plants. So you basically have a male female producing you have producing male or female gametes, so sperm and egg, etc. And let's just continue back. All right, let's continue back here. All right, so an example of this different mating rituals. So, or just the idea of behavioral isolation. So in dioecious species, males and females have to search for a partner, be in proximity to each other, carry out the complex mating rituals, and finally copulate, which is a male introduces sperm into the female, or release their gametes into the environment in order to breed. So yes, basically a lot of stuff have to come together for them to reproduce. All right, continue further. So habitat isolation, these are physical barriers or seasonal travel opposite of other similar species. And gametic isolations, gamete incompatibility or inability to produce hybrid offspring despite the gametes being found in the same time and place. Yeah, so this is similar to that. Other incompatibilities here we went over. That is the similar to this one here. Let's see what that is. The Bateson-Dobzhansky-Muller model. So the incompatibilities described by them. Yeah, when you have actually gametic isolation, or basically the alleles in this case don't match for the specific Dobzhansky-Muller incompatibilities, or you could have other types where just the gametes aren't interacting, or just are not able to produce the hybrid, etc. And it could be from the different mutations set up and so on. So anyways, the term habitat summarizes the array of resources, physical and biotic factors that are present in an area, such as to support the survival and reproduction of a particular species. So basically, the habitat is pretty much everything. You have the resources, you have the physical, you have both physical and biotic, in other words, life forms and organisms and etc. Plants, animals, and so on. Okay, going to continue further. So similarly, post-zygotic isolations, which we mentioned earlier, which is occurring after fertilization or mating, can result in hybridization being selected against due to the lower viability of hybrids or hybrid infertility. So again, the mule, hybrid of a horse and a donkey. And let's fix this up. So hybrid of a horse and donkey, but I'll just say this was actually male horse or male donkey. Actually, we have this written over here. So just hybrid of a horse and donkey. And then hybrid zones can emerge if there were to be incomplete reproductive isolation between two closely related species. Yes, you can still have a hybrid zone, yeah, if it's not complete reproductive isolation. So MES note, mules, it's a male donkey or a jack, plus female horse, which is a mare. And hinnies, just to go over, which is a male horse, which is a stallion, plus female donkey is a jenny. So this is a hinny, is a hybrid of the male horse, female donkey. And then mules is male donkey, female horse. or Jack plus mare, and then the hinnies are stallion plus jenny. Have 63 chromosomes. So these mules and hinnies have 63 chromosomes. A mixture of the horse is 64 and the donkey 62. The different structure and number usually prevents the chromosomes from pairing up properly and creating successful embryos, rendering most mules, the key is most, which is very interesting. So most mules are infertile, and I assume hinnies as well. So look at this one right here. So here's a mule, how it looks like, and that's compared with a jenny. So that's a mule, looks like a kind of a small horse. And what's the next one? There is a hinny. Yeah, no, not Jenny. Jenny is a female donkey. Yes, a female donkey. So this is a mule. A hinny is a male horse stallion plus female donkey Jenny. Yeah, so now I got confused with Jenny and hinny. So hinnies is the hybrid, and there's this one here. Notice the difference in just these two images right there. This looks more stocky and more hairy and hairier. This one looks more like a horse. Very fast. This looks more like a mule. Yeah, I mean, looks more like a donkey, not a mule. This is a mule. Yes, a donkey. Anyways, continue further. A hybrid zone exists where the ranges of two interbreeding species or diverged intraspecific lineages meet and cross-fertilize. Yeah, so they're actually hybridizing inside there. So, and here, so this is intraspecific lineages. So intraspecificity, literally within species or being intraspecific, describes behaviors, biochemical variations, and other issues within individuals of a single species. Yeah, so basically, in other words, hybrid zone exists where the ranges of two interbreeding species or diverged within lineages, of a single species and cross-fertilize. So it could be two interbreeding species or the same one that had that species that had diverged lineages within. So fascinating. And so here's a hybrid zone. Here's a figure of it here. So hybrid zones over time. This one is from sliderbase.com. So just from a PowerPoint presentation, I believe. And let's just make this maybe a bit smaller, just to include this. All right, so let's go over this figure. So hybrid zones over time. So what you have is here. So population, 5 individuals are shown. There's population, and there's gene flow. They're interbreeding between each other. There's 5 individuals there. And then there's a barrier to gene flow. Yeah, actually, going back here to 5 individuals shown, I think it's 5 individuals per each of these subset groups there. So there's 4 times 5, so that's 20, because if you just look at how they set up here. And then there's an isolated population diverges here, and there's a barrier to gene flow right here. So one of these gets separated and goes all the way across here. So one of these goes separated. Or let's say you had initially 5 individuals and they created 20. Yeah, so that could be what it's describing. So anyways, one of these gets stuck and goes over to this side, and it's not being able to flow. It's not able to transfer genes to this other major set of it. To the bigger population there. So what's going to happen is isolated population diverges through mutations and so on, while this one just keeps going its way here. So even if it does mutate, it's still going to be similar to the other ones, because they're all going to be sharing their genes and so on. So it's going to continue going further. So this one, let's just say the same color here, and or basically this could just be, because it's a bigger population, it could still be this very, very similar to this one. But because only a small subset is gone over to here in this isolated population zone. So anyways, what happens here now is, now you have a hybrid zone where there is a small chance where these can actually interact and then form hybrids. While in general direction it's still going and still it's still diverging further and further, both of them, but there is a small chance that a few of the individuals can go and interact and then form a hybrid zone. And then here's possible outcomes is over here. So there's a hybrid. These ones are hybrids. There's a hybrid zone. I don't know why this is pointing to the same as a hybrid zone. It could be. I think it's probably pointing to this one. It's pointed to there. It should be pointing to that one. So anyways, so I didn't make the figure, but yeah. So anyways, so that's the hybrid. These are the hybrids, and it's a hybrid zone. And possible outcomes, what you could have is reinforcement or gene flow barrier. which is these continue on like basically smaller and smaller. There's no other hybrids coming in, so you basically have a small population and either just pretty much seeing it basically is slowly dying off there. So it's a reinforcement of gene flow barrier. So there is no extra hybrids coming in, so less chance of survival over long term, or fusion into one species. So this can go and diverge back into itself. So that's one setup with the hybrids, and then you have one species that includes all the hybrids and so on. And then, or we could have a stability, continued formation of hybrid individuals and separations. You could actually have a full separation. It goes parallel, and this one goes, just keeps going. So that is fascinating stuff. And if I were to draw this similarly for the reinforcement one, we could end up having as this just keeps going. It's reinforced, and then this dies off. It goes there. Or there's very, very few of those. All right, sort of fascinating stuff. And then there's very few new hybrids coming in.